How do we recover and heal after a traumatic birth? How do we help women in our families, in our communities? How do we help them heal after a traumatic birth? Today on the Fearless Future podcast, we're going to be unpacking this sensitive topic. What happens to a woman when she has undergone a traumatic birth experience, why it happens, what we can do to support her, and how we as a community and as a society can promote healing. That's all coming up today with our beautiful special guest, Brigid Tebaldi, on the Fearless Future podcast presented by the Guiding Star Project. Welcome to the Fearless Future podcast, where your hosts Lisa Canning and Leah Jacobson will explore what the world would look like if women didn't fear pregnancy. Through education, community, and healthcare solutions, Guiding Star Project strives to make this a reality at our physical centers across the United States. Join us. For the last few months over here at the Guiding Star Project, we've been exploring this theme of fearless future. What would it look like? What would it mean for society if women did not fear pregnancy? And it's a very compelling question to unpack and to ponder. I think it drives a lot of women's decisions, all kinds of circles. Week podcast, we had beautiful Dr. Catherine Bacolic talk with us about the economic and societal impacts of the birth control pill and delaying pregnancy, what that has to do on an economic level. And we talked a lot about fear. And one of the components, of course, that has to be unpacked in this conversation of a fearless future is fear of the actual birth itself. And so excited to welcome to the podcast today our very special guest, Brigid Tebaldi. But before she comes on, we have a very, very exciting announcement here at Guiding Star National. We have teamed up with our affiliate at Guiding Star Tampa for a very special event happening this Thursday, August 15, and we want to invite you to join us. We are going to be unpacking in this beautiful live event what it looks like for birth to be an empowering experience and what it looks like for you to join us in this movement to create an empowering birth experience for women. I'm going to be joining this Thursday. We're also going to be joined by the beautiful Tammy Massoud, our midwife in Tampa, Florida. We are going to be joined by Mark Cavalier, our one of our directors at our El Paso location, and the beautiful Leah Jacobson, founder of the Guiding Star Project, to unpack what it looks like to have an empowering birth. And we are going to be unveiling something very, very special, something that the Tampa community has been waiting a very, very long time for. So we're going to be making a very special announcement. August 15, this Thursday, August 15th at 8:30 p.m. East, we invite you to this very special live event hosted right here on our YouTube channel. And you can find a link to register so you can grab reminders and everything, all the information. If you can't attend the event live, the replay will be sent straight to your inbox. So do register for that event when the link is up inside of the description for this episode. All right, without further ado, I'd love to bring down to the Fearless Future podcast, Brigid Tebaldi. Brigid, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And that event sounds really great.
Oh, we're going to have so much fun. I've only just recently learned about the midwifery approach to birth, and it's just fantastic. All right, so Brigid, you've got a little sidekick with you. Who's with you on the podcast today?
I have Hugo here. He's about a little over 3 months.
Oh my!
And they all my kids have pretty much been attached to me until they're about a year and a half. So anytime you see me on anything, you'll probably see him with me.
I mean, me too. I'm actually surprised to not have sweet baby Lucy who normally is also very attached to me. One of my older kids has her for a walk. So Hugo is very welcome to make his voice heard during this podcast. But Brigid, for anyone who might not be familiar with you and your work, could you kindly introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I am a mom of 5. We live in Pennsylvania, and I work virtually with women to help them heal after a challenging birth experience, traumatic birth. There's a few different words that people use around it. So just any of those experiences that weren't what they wanted. Again, I help them heal around those and to help them see that this doesn't have to be their future in every single pregnancy if there's future pregnancies. And again, just helping them to understand why this might have happened, help them if they're trying for another baby, like prevent this from happening in the future. So just really helping to help them empower themselves because they're the ones who ultimately have to do that. So just by giving them knowledge, resources, exercises, that sort of thing.
Beautiful. So let's start with some definitions. What is a traumatic birth? You said that some people use different words to describe. Like, help us understand that aspect.
Yeah, so again, it really depends on the person and what words resonate with them and their own words. So I don't necessarily try to label it too much. That's why I say like a challenging birth or a difficult birth, because that can mean different things for different people. But the definition of trauma, just generally speaking, is going to be anything that has been distressing, like frightening or scary, stressful, whether that be like emotional pain, physical pain, anything that's difficult to cope with is going to be around that traumatic birth. And some words that I hear around that specifically from women are going to be like that things were done to me, that I felt out of control, that I didn't know what was going on, like my baby was taken away. So those are some different words that I personally hear from women whenever I work with them.
Yeah. I was just on your Instagram. I really want to encourage people to remind me of your handle on Instagram.
Yeah, it's Loreto Wellness. So Loreto Wellness. I named after the Litany of Loreto. So that's where it comes from.
I was spending some time on your Instagram just prior to this conversation, and you put in your story some words that women describe their births. And some of it was very beautiful and positive. And then a lot of it was fearful, traumatic, scary. So I've had 10 11 very positive births. My one of my babies was a miscarriage. But even that one, I feel like the delivery of that baby was, I felt very, very well cared for. So I would say all of my 11 deliveries, I would not use the word trauma, but I've been very much educated that this is just simply not the case for everyone. There are women out there who have had really challenging circumstances around their birth. Why do you think it happens? Like, unpack for us just the reality around that. What causes or what can cause a traumatic birth?
Yeah, so the biggest thing and they've actually done research on this. So the biggest thing that they've found is that a birth that a woman might consider to be like, quote, a traumatic birth is actually one where they didn't feel like they were in charge of what was happening, or they weren't the ones telling others what they needed. So it doesn't necessarily, the mode of delivery is not the important part. So again, you can have somebody who finds that a C-section is like this beautiful experience, but then have somebody who had a pain or a medication-free vaginal birth be traumatic. So the mode of delivery is not the important thing. It's more of that the choice and the choices are from the woman, not done to the woman.
So let's talk about that. How does one then, so I'm assuming that if we want to give women a less traumatic experience or try to set the stage for a less traumatic experience and do what we can, what are some of those elements? Like, how do we have women advocate and feel like they're part of the experience rather than things being done to them?
Yes, the biggest thing is informed consent, which unfortunately our medical system is not necessarily set up for it. And I'm in the US, but I was actually trained in Canada, so I know about all of that system. So again, informed consent is the biggest thing. And it's no fault on necessarily the doctors or anybody like that. It's more of the system itself is not set up to allow those things to happen. And informed consent is simply just the care practitioner offering the pros, cons, potential outcomes to the woman and her husband or spouse, and them having the ability to make those decisions for themselves with that information. So again, it's not any sort of, everybody has bias, but it's the care practitioner trying to remove that bias, their own bias, and offer information so that, again, the woman can make the decision that feels aligned with whatever they want. And then from there, care is done to them with whatever they choose. So that is the biggest thing, is again, the informed consent. The second is just the knowledge, and that comes somewhat from the informed consent, but also it's really important, again, that women take that into their own hands during pregnancy and don't just show up to the hospital and just expect things to go great. I did that personally, so that's why I can say that. With my first, I did zero preparation, and I just showed up and hoped that things would go well, and thankfully they did. But again, that's not the norm. So it's super, super important that you educate yourself, that you learn what it is that you want. If you want to go the hospital route, if you want to go the home route, if you want to go the birth center route, figure it out what you want before birth, so that during labor, that's not the time to decide what it is that you guys want.
Yeah. My experience was similar. I showed up to my first birth with very little preparation. I went to the one class that the hospital offered, and I'm really reflecting on this in my time now here at Guiding Star. Education is so important to us. Education is a central tenet to what we do, what we offer at our centers. And I just simply didn't have any. I had very, very limited education on optional, other options for how to have a birth experience. It was really very narrow. I had a very narrow sort of understanding of this is how you can have a baby. And so for me personally, because it went well the first time, I just rinsed and repeated every single time. And it did not, until my 8th pregnancy, did I not deviate from the norm. So my first 7 were all epidural and all very, very routine, I'm going to call it. And it wasn't at number 8 did I feel any type of, why don't we try something different? Why don't we try for a natural birth? So I just find this very, very interesting. Okay, so when a woman has gone through something traumatic, what do we do? This is where your work obviously comes in as a coach, as a helper. When a woman has not had that experience of informed consent for whatever reason, or simply feels like she was not a part of the process, what do we start to do to heal?
The biggest thing that I do is I just listen. So I sit and listen to them and reflect back what they have told me so that they can hear what it is that they perceive to have experienced or what they did experience. So I listen, I reflect back, and then from there, the conversation usually opens up and they start to be like, well, why did this happen? So the first thing that we do is just go through that full birth story again, the way that they remember it in that moment. And then again, I reflect it back to them, because that shows them that somebody is listening to them. And even if that experience wasn't what they wanted, right now they're getting what they need, which is, again, somebody to listen. So that's the biggest thing. It's just somebody listening to them and reflecting back what it is that they experienced.
So, that's just common sense. Do you know what I mean? Everybody wants to feel listened to. But birth is it's such a deeply personal experience. You really are you yourself and I, in the sense that no one else is going to give birth for you.
Yep.
Nobody. I remember, so my last pregnancy, Lucy's birth, I just remember distinctly at one point being like, I'm done. I'm done. I am not doing this anymore. I am no longer doing this. And I remember then very, very quickly after being like, there is no one else who's going to do this. It's you. Your body is going to do it. I've heard you talk about the shame that some women feel when a birth has gone wrong, so to speak, or felt traumatic. Unpack that a little bit for us when a woman feels shame after her birth.
Yeah, so a lot of what I also do is we go through the thoughts of like, what if? So there's a lot of self-blame instead of self-trust. So we go through we don't go through like the what ifs, but we sort of unpack that in that moment, you did what you thought was best for your baby. And there is a reason that you did that, like a chemical reason, hormonal, why you did what you did. So the what ifs aren't necessarily important because you don't, just like in life, you can't ever go through the what ifs because again, you don't know what if you did this? What if you did that? So again, going through that and like making them realize again, and this is where some of the education comes in, where you did what you thought was best in the moment. And again, there is literally a chemical reason that you did that. And so we go through all of that. So that's one of the biggest things that we go through, again, to replace the shame with more self-trust. So again, it's, I did what was best, what I believed was best in that moment for my baby. Like I did the best that I could in that moment. So just replacing the blame and the shame with thoughts of trust and like self-trust is really huge. Really shifts the narrative to, again, something that like the woman perceives as I did something wrong and more of like I did what I thought was best in the moment. So it's easy to say, but having that shift occur takes time, but it's super, super important because again, you can't go back and change that past. You can only, it's not that we change how you think about it, but like we reframe it in a way so that again, it's not your fault what happened to you. Again, you did what was best in the moment. And now it's just a matter of unpacking those negative feelings that you have so that you can see why you acted that way that you did.
What are some helpful scripts that you help your women develop for themselves? You know, what are these sentences? I love the expression, thoughts are simply sentences in your brain, right? What are some of these sentences that you help your women develop when they are feeling this sense of self-trust?
Yeah, so we use quite a few affirmations, maybe like putting sticky notes up or using an app to like listen back to them. And it's a lot of just what I just said, like, I did what I thought was best in the moment. That's a big, huge one because again, literally that's what women are doing in the moment. They feel like they're doing what is best for them, for their baby, and they are. So that's a big one. It's just those affirmations. And then I use a really powerful tool where, and I work with a lot of Christian women, so that's why this works for me. But I use this really powerful tool where we go back and we see where Jesus was in your story. And you can see that again, he was in that moment with you. And while he didn't necessarily want that moment for you, there's a reason that he has allowed it to occur and good will come from it. So that's a really powerful exercise. That again, it doesn't change what happened or like change the memory necessarily, but it just makes it a little bit different by reframing it so that again, you see that there's a purpose for this and that even though it feels bad right now, good will come from it. We might not be able to see it now, but eventually we'll know why this happened.
Let's talk about fear of pain, because this is just a great topic to unpack. Many people see birth as painful, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember my first natural birth. I still have, her name is Anna Saucier, and I still have Anna's voice in my head. She was like, "It's not pain, it's pressure. It's not pain, it's pressure." But of course, it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure. But at the exact same breath, there are ways that you can navigate, with your thoughts, what you're thinking about the pain. But for women who have had a very painful experience, like perhaps there was physical tearing or physical, things that really just were very painful, how do you help those women be able to look forward to, let's say, or at least even be open to the possibility of another birth?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is, again, the education portion, because a lot of the times, and again, I've had 5 babies, no meds anytime. So I know, like, even this last one, I was like, I can't go into labor. Like, I can't do this again. And I have all the education. So one of the biggest things, though, is education and helping them understand, physiology because if you allow your body to go into labor naturally and you allow the process to occur naturally, so again, where you feel safe, eating the foods that you feel comfortable eating, so just basically going through your day as normally as you can while you're in labor, what happens is that your brain will send off that oxytocin to kind of get labor going and everything like that. But then what also happens is that you have these beta endorphins that are released as well. So there's this feedback loop where you have this oxytocin released, and then that creates that pressure on your uterus. But then you also have these endorphins that are going to help kind of ramp you back up so that the pain is dissipated a little bit. So again, it's not that that goes away, but it's your body's way of going through and protecting like it and not making it so bad. And the other thing that I like to say to them is that, again, your contractions, again, in a physiological birth, I'll touch on the other stuff in a minute. Your contractions in a physiological birth, and just in case you're not aware, physiological birth is, again, natural, no pain meds, no augmentation, no inductions, anything like that. So in a physiological birth, again, your contractions cannot be bigger than you can handle because your body is creating them. So again, you can handle them because your body is creating them. Now, if you are having an experience where, say, you did get Pitocin is different. There's no doubt about that because, again, your body doesn't have this feedback loop where you then release those beta endorphins. So there are definitely things that we talk about to say, like, before you consent to Pitocin, like, here's what could happen. And that's the biggest thing is, again, the education beforehand so that they can make that informed decision where if they accept Pitocin, then maybe these things happen because, again, birth is no longer physiological in that regard. So then that opens up the table for all of the different cascades of interventions that may occur. So it's really, again, just that education portion, helping them understand the physiology of birth and also that normal contractions, again, non-augmented contractions are waves. And this sounds easy for me to say and not in the moment, but it really is true where it's a wave, where it builds up, it's at peak intensity, and then it crashes right away. It's not this thing that just like keeps growing. It really does crash. And then you have a break, even if you're pushing. Like with my last one, this might be TMI, but whatever. I had like a minute or two where his head was delivered and I didn't have any contractions. And my midwives were like, it's fine. Just stay there. Everything's good. And then like one more contraction and he was delivered. So it's just that reshifting or reframing it to be like, everything's fine. If you just let your body just do what it does. It doesn't mean that it's going to be pain-free, like that new catchphrase, but it does mean that you know that you are strong enough to handle it.
Yeah. And I think that's that phrase that you just said, that you are strong enough to handle it. My experience, again, this is my personal experience of 10 healthy babies, is you are stronger than you know. Mm-hmm. I remember just being like, wow, like Lisa Canning, like your body has done amazing work, right?
Yeah.
But the funny sounds way too light of a word, but the word that's coming to mind, like the funny or challenging thing is that you don't know it until you've gone through it. Like you don't know you're as strong and as capable as you actually are until you have evidence that you are strong and capable. So how do you help your women? A Bible verse is coming to mind. Like this is, I walk by faith and not by sight, right? Like we can't see it. So how do you help your women have that hope in something they haven't quite experienced just yet?
Yes. So again, I keep coming back to education, but that's really what it is. You don't start planning for this while you're in labor. Like you start months in advance because it really, especially in our culture today where we're shown that like birth is scary, that the media tells us that what it looks like is like you have this massive like water everywhere while you're on the train in public, and then you go to the hospital screaming and you scream for the next 24 hours. Like reframing that to be like, that's not really what birth has to look like. And so just shifting our mind from what we're shown birth to look like to reflecting on stories of women who, not that you have to have like the water birth and the twinkle lights and all that, like that's beautiful if that's what you want, but just showing women what birth looks like and can look like is really, really, really powerful. And then just again, not not waiting until that minute or the moments of labor to really figure out what you want. So that means choosing your care team very carefully, because if you walk in and you're just like, oh, who's ever here to help me is fine, you know, that might be fine with you, but you don't necessarily know what they're comfortable with, what the care team that you choose is comfortable with. So vetting out who you want in your birth space is super important, because if you don't feel comfortable, your body is not going to do what it's made to do. You need to feel comfortable with those who are around you. You need to feel comfortable in your space. You need to feel comfortable with what's happening. So just that preparation begins long before labor. And it's not fun to talk about because it's way more fun to like go shopping for clothes and stuff. But really, this is like the important part here.
Well, I'm chuckling because I'm reminded of my last birth. I had the wonderful experience of working with a midwife team, but then unfortunately they were very afraid of preeclampsia. My blood pressure just like went through the roof on the day that I gave birth. I couldn't get it to calm down. I was swelling everywhere. Like I remember my toothbrush. I couldn't hold my toothbrush because my hand was so swollen. So they were like, clearly something's wrong. So I was transferred to the OB. But my midwives were able to be with me the whole time. But the thing that I'm chuckling about is they had a student in the room. Okay. I'm all for learning. Okay, everybody, I'm all for learning. But I was excited about and motivated to have a natural birth. I typically birth fairly quickly. And so I was like, I can do this. But it was very painful. And so I was really excited to get into the birth tub that they had. They had a spaceship looking birth tub, so exciting. However, bless it, the student had no idea how to operate the birth tub, and that's totally fine. I I get it. She had just started, and the birth tub is complicated because it moves, and so you have to fill the water at the right time. Anyway, long story short, I just remember being like, get the person who knows how to work this because I was so ready for a little bit of relief. And it just, yes, the people that you have around you, it is helpful when they know the equipment so that you're not also freaking out. I was able to have enough mind management that somebody was going to come along, but for sure, a younger version of me would not have had that same mind management, like that same ability to not absolutely implode because my body was going through much physical duress. And this is, as a trained mindset coach, this is where I find birth so fascinating, the work that you do so fascinating. It is so much about navigating it moment to moment. Like I remember the more I thought about the future, the more stressed and freaked out I got. But the more I just stayed in that center, exactly like you said with your baby, like right there, like the head is right there for a minute or two. If you think I have to stay like this for an hour, you're of course being natural. Your mind is going to send triggers of like you're in danger. But if you can just stay in that moment, like it can be very, very powerful. So what can we do as a community, as a society, when we know that women in our world, in our families, in our friend groups have had a traumatic birth? What can we do to support them?
Yes. Listen to them. Don't say, don't say this. Don't say, oh, but you have a healthy baby and like you're healthy. That's all that matters. Don't say that. Because yes, I mean, that's an awesome outcome, but that totally negates her experience and what she's feeling and what she went through. And especially we always forget about the husbands as well, because they're also there. So if they're seeing their wife or like strapped to the bed and not be able to get what she wants and she's crying or whatever, like we also need to remember husbands too. But so if a woman has gone through that, don't ever say, well, just thank goodness that you're both okay. So the best thing that you can do is to first drop off a meal. Don't stay and hold the baby. Just leave a meal. If they have older kids, like take them outside and play. After the meal has like been dropped off, leave unless they ask you to stay and not are being polite about it. And then just if they ask you to stay, just listen to them. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. You can just sit there and stare at their eyes and just listen to them. And then very occasionally just say like, oh, your baby's so cute. Don't ask to hold the baby or anything. Just listen, bring them food, stay out of the way. Those aren't fun things to do, but those are the best things to do.
Holding space for negative emotions is, I just think, one of the most valuable under emphasized skills, I think, to learn in life, because we can value as a society getting things done and productivity and, moving on. Let's keep going. Let's bounce back. I feel like we could do a whole podcast episode on the damaging effect of the phrase bounce back. Like, I want to bounce back after a baby. I want to get back to my old self, Anyway, but my point is that being able to hold space for someone's negative situation, negative emotions, negative memories, and not fix them, I just think is a very important skill for us to be, good friends, good helpmates. At some point there is a time to fix, absolutely, but this holding space is actually a huge component of that. Being able to process, being allowed to feel something negative and pause, I think, is so important. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, 100%. And it is not easy. There are many times when I'm hearing a story and I just want to like scream and be like, what? Like they did that or something like that. But it's like, that's not helpful to the woman. Once you have the relationship established and you're going through and doing some different things, like, yes, then I can do that. But when they're first telling me that story, I don't say anything. I just sit and listen. If they have to pause to like catch their thoughts or whatever, then I just sit and listen. And then even if they need some prompting, I don't ask them about specific things. I just say things like, can you tell me more about this? Or, wow, that happened to you. Can you tell me more? And usually by just saying things like that and knowing when to say them is the hard part, but usually just holding that space, listening to them and knowing when to ask questions usually opens the women up to really talking about it and having feelings come out that they didn't know they had or were repressing. And then that's whenever like the healing can actually start.
Yeah. Can you tell me more about this? Is such a powerful sentence. I want to encourage everybody listening. That's just such a good sentence to use in life for anyone because it helps them to feel heard. Like, that's a really, really, really great phrase. Brigid, I could talk to you all day, but is there anything else on this topic that you haven't had a chance to share that you want to share with us?
I just want to tell women that I know it's so fun to like go out and pick out the cute outfits and do the nursery and all that sort of thing. But I would really encourage you to do those things, but to also invest time in figuring out what you want and figuring out not what everybody is telling you to want, but figure out what you want. And then from there, make that happen. Do whatever you can to make that happen. Even if insurance is an issue or if you have some fears, explore them. Like really take the time to figure it out because it is your baby's birthday, but it's also a massive transformation that you're going to go through as a mom to go from no baby to a baby or to go from like one baby to two or so on and so on. Each time that you go through this it's a transformational time and it deserves space and it deserves time for you to reflect on it. So I would just really encourage you to figure out what you want, figure out what you're comfortable with, explore what your fears are telling you. And just again, it's not just a day, like this birth will stay with you for the rest of your life.
Before we close, what words would you use to describe your own birth?
Oh man. So do you want each birth? Because I have 5 of them, or do you want just the last one?
Yeah, let's do all 5.
Okay, so the first birth would be I'm going to say surprised because I had no idea what to expect.
Okay.
I went in totally uninformed. Second one was definitely scary because I had some pretty traumatic stuff happen to me postpartum. Third was healing. Fourth was healing. I'm going to say third was still kind of scared because of what happened. So third was scared. Fourth was healing. Fifth was, and this might sound crazy, but almost like addictive because I just had those hormones going and I'm like, I could do this again. So yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, wait, we have to unpack that a little bit. Tell me more about that. Why was the fifth one addictive?
Because it was just, I was in my own space here where I felt comfortable. And I had the first three in the hospital. These last two were home births, but I was in my own space. I was so confident in my body and in my knowledge because I had like gone through this big training and everything. I was so confident myself. I knew, like, I was still scared that, like, I can't do these contractions, but my husband was like, you've done this many times before. Like, you can do this again. And even in during that phase, whenever it's like right before baby comes out, I'm like, I can't do this. And he just was like, yes, you can. Like, you have to do this, but yes, you can do this. So it was addictive because after, like, it was just so beautiful. The midwives just literally stayed in the corner until I like needed them. They didn't say anything. Like, they didn't do anything. And then the baby was born and I just, like, nobody touched him. I just picked him up, brought him up to my chest. I laid down on our bed. Nobody did anything. Nobody had said anything. The midwives left to like do whatever they do. And I was left with the baby for like, I don't know, 30 minutes or so. When I was ready to push out the placenta, I did that. It wasn't anything major. And I just had all these hormones going because the baby was nursing and I was just like in this bliss and it was just beautiful. And yeah, I could totally do it again because it was just such this beautiful time. Because I was the one calling the shots, not because people were telling me what to do.
So interesting. Oh my goodness. That is awesome. Brigid, where can people go to learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on Instagram. Again, it's Loreto Wellness, Loreto Wellness. You can probably search my name too and it'll come up. Or I also have a website. It's loretowellness.com. So again, Loreto wellness.com. I do have a free 20-minute call if anybody needs to jump on and unpack anything. I love chatting with women about anything really. It doesn't just have to be birth related. It can be motherhood related, anything like that, because it's all intertwined. So yeah, I'd love to chat with everybody.
Beautiful. Brigid, thank you so much for your contributions to building a fearless future. So much fun. Oh my goodness, my friends, it is such a joy to talk about these topics. If you're like me, maybe you're like me, I'm curious if you're like me, where for some of you, this is totally brand new, where you're only discovering this information, that this education is available to you. If you are sort of similar to me, where you are learning a lot of this for the very first time, welcome. And if you're a veteran around the block who's got a lot of experience and this is very much in your wheelhouse, let's get this message out there of empowerment to as many women as we can. Thanks so much for joining us on the Fearless Future podcast, and we'll see you next time.